Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, we're going to make some cute color blocks. They're pre-made elements that you can make ahead of time and use in your slow stitching projects. Now I try and do a monotone or monochromatic piece. So each block, which is made from scraps, is a single color. Now take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. So I have pinks, and I'll be patterns of pinks, or I'll use blues. And I'll take patterned fabric that has some blue in it. And you play around. Now this is a really fun project because I use whatever I have in my scrap bin. And then I take an unexpected element. It could be something like a piece of trim or a ribbon, or a button or a bead, or even something maybe a little out of the box, like a used postage stamp or a fortune, or something that dangles, like a little pin or something you want to repurpose for another project. That unexpected element in your work adds a lot of interest to your piece. Now I don't make these in perfect squares. I make them so that they run off the square base that I use. This way, when I add them to my slow stitching, they'll blend right in with my work. This is a project I like to do when I want to sew or I want to create something, but I'm not really sure what, and I don't really want a new project that I'm going to dive into. So I'll just pull out my scraps, go through my little box of little treasures, find little things to add to my pieces, and just make a few at a time. Or I'll spend an afternoon and make a ton at a time. I find this project to be really helpful to use in my slow stitching. So let's get started.
So to start, I gather my materials because this is really a stash buster here. I went through my odds and ends and I found some buttons and some beads, some little offcuts of ribbon, just ribbon that, or trim or lace, that I haven't really finished using, but the pieces were too big to discard. Or I just happen to love them, like this little velvety ribbon. I just think it's gorgeous and I think I'm going to use it today. I have a couple of pins, a safety pin, and I think this is a garment pin, usually found connecting tags to garments. I just salvage these from when I purchase a new shirt or something. I'm reusing this little fabric bow here. I have this little stash. I think I got this at the Paper Goods. I think it's a Tim Holtz little thing. I have some fabric here that was striped, and I cut it out so that it becomes ribbon, or at least the element of ribbon. And I try and find pieces that are dedicated to a particular color or a dominant color. This one has a few colors going on, same thing here. And this one's perfect for just a green. This one I can get away with for like a gold. And this one, even though it has green and pink, I think it'll work in some things. I also have some papers here, some reused stamps from envelopes. If I find an interesting stamp, I'll cut it out and set it aside. A little tea note from a tea bag, and then a fortune. I might be able to use these in my work as well. And then I have just some found objects here. This is like a little plastic sprocket type thing, and a little wooden circle. Really anything you can attach to your pieces will make it more interesting, and this is the perfect place to use them. So I'll set these aside for now. Then I go through my scrap fabric bin. I have a few bins like this where it's just little offcuts of fabric, but it's fabric that I really like. I'll save it for a while, go through it and use it, and then when I get fed up, maybe at the end of the year or so, I'll clean out any scraps that I'm kind of sick of working with. But for now, I'll just make little piles of scraps, and I do that according to color because we're doing these little color blocks. So I separated some piles of color because I plan on working with all of these at some point. And now I have kind of my materials to use, my paint for my canvas, so to speak. And then I just found some thread that was in a color family. Because I'm sticking to that same color theme, I just want to group things accordingly. So today I'm going to make one, I think I'm going to make one using this gray and maybe a neutral. So after I have my fabric swatches all piled up together, then I'll go through those little accessories, the trims, and I'll add them according to color. I don't have to use all of them, but it is nice to have a bunch of them, and just that gives me some options. So with the neutrals, I have a lot more options because you can really make anything work as a neutral. And I have my paper scraps. Can also use the other side if I wanted to. And I'll keep looking and seeing here. For each thing, I like to use at least one unexpected element, and that unexpected element is either a button or the trim, any of those accessories that we found before. So now I'm ready to start my piece. I'm going to work on these two colors today, so I'll set aside everything else. So to start with, I start with my base. That's just a little piece of muslin, and I cut it down to whatever size I want. Now I purposely make these on the small side. I just want a little element to use that I can create ahead of time, and I can use it in my slow stitching. Now one of the things to keep in mind is that I like to have my fabrics and my trim run off of my block. And this way, when I use it in my slow stitching, it doesn't look like I just took a block and set it down in my work. I'll combine those elements, it'll run off the block, and it makes a really interesting effect. So I'll just cut two bases here. We'll work on one at a time. And now we can start the design process. We'll start with this neutral here. I have my base, and now I just start with the fabrics, and I just decide how I want to layer them. This piece can be used whole as it is, or I can trim it down a little. I can decide if I want the frayed edge or the straight edge. Set that down. Take this little piece. That seems to work just nicely as it is. Now I can throw in this other piece. I think I'll set that aside. And now I'll just play around with my trim and my elements. I think I know what I'll do. I'll make another square within that square. So I'll take the trim set it down, maybe have this piece come off, just trail off. And instead of a square, which was my original intention, I think I'll just have another line here trailing off over here. So I'll clip that trim. Decide how I want that. Maybe I'll flip this over. And I'll add a little piece in here. Can add that circle. Ooh, that heart. I think I like that heart. Just like that. So now I have a little piece, and all I have to do is tack it down with my thread. So I like the way that looks. There's plenty of room to add more embellishment or to even remove pieces as I want, but I think I'm going to stick with it just like this, stitch it down, and then I'll have my neutral element. Now let's design the charcoal colored one. So here I have my little basis. This is a little bit smaller, and I have all my little pieces here. Now I have this button, which I can use. I can use this. I found this little swatch of fabric, and I think it's adorable. So I want to use him in my work. I'll start by making my background pieces, layering them on. And I like that little ruffled edge there, the little frayed edge. So I'll set him down right on top of the piece, and it covers the entire piece. And then I can decide how I want to do this. I think I'll match that frayed edge, but I don't want it to be quite so large. This is just hit or miss, and this is the design process that you go through. And it's really fun. It's a nice way to just create using supplies you already have. I kind of like that. Maybe I'll stitch around it and round the edges a bit. Now this little guy can be my element all to itself. I think I'll flip it over and add a little folded tag. And stitch down like that, although that's a lot of texture for that heavyweight ribbon. So maybe I'll just do it like this. trim around here a little bit more and just constantly modifying the technique, taking my original idea and just seeing if something might work out a little bit better. Yeah, so I like that. So I'll stitch this one down as well as this one, and we'll see about our little color block pieces. So I've stitched all the little areas down that I wanted to stitch around the lace here, the button, and that's the back. And now it's ready to be put in my stash to be used in my work. Did the same thing here with this charcoal one with the face. It's really cute. It looks like there's plenty of room to add additional elements if I want, maybe some beads. If I come across the right color that I want to use, or when I'm ready to use it in my work, I can continue to embellish it. This is a really fun way to use up your scraps and then reuse them in the future. I find this to be really enjoyable to create, especially when I want to create something, I'm not sure what, but I have my supplies all on hand, I don't need anything new, and I can just use up what I have.
So that's how I make these cute color blocks. I really like it because it's a stash buster. I use leftover fabric. I use little treasures that I have that I'm not really quite sure what I want to use them for, but I know that they have a purpose. It's a fun little project. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.